Learning will respect freedom of conscience and religion. For teachers, this means respecting the different values and beliefs that are held within their students' families. And for the students, this means being open to the diversity they'll encounter in the classroom.
The project that the students worked on today in class was based on different practices in different religions in the world.
The new program is called Éthique et culture religieuse, Ethics and Religious Culture, and it has two objectives. The recognition of the other, reconnaître l'autre, and the other objective is the pursuit of the common good. And those two objectives are achieved through three competencies that examine the phenomenon of religion, that examine also ethical issues, and that all of that is done in a spirit of dialogue. A debate is there's a winner and a loser. In a dialogue, there's supposed to be two winners. Because I want to know what your opinion is. I want to know what you might want to be interested where I'm coming from. It doesn't mean you're going to agree with me, but you can at least understand me.
Ces parents ne veulent rien savoir du nouveau programme d'éthique et de culture religieuse et ils exigent que leurs enfants en soient exemptés. Ces parents allèguent que le nouveau programme brime leur liberté de conscience et de religion. La majorité des manifestants sont des catholiques et d'anciens catholiques qui sont devenus chrétiens évangéliques.
C'est vrai, on ne parle pas de foi, on ne parle pas de dogme, on le sait très bien. Mais le message qu'il perçoit, c'est que sa religion, qu'il soit musulman, chrétien, même athée, est égale aux autres. Là, on va trouver des controverses entre l'école et la maison, et c'est l'enfant qui va être pris entre les deux.
We almost have to go back to the whole history of Quebec, but the major change, in, you know about the Quiet Revolution, we're talking 1960. Quebec didn't even have a Ministry of Education until 1960, so that was the first time. Paul Lajoie was the first Minister of Education, he's still alive. Before that, basically, the schools were controlled by the Protestant schools by a Protestant committee, Catholic schools by a Catholic committee, the Catholic bishops, etc., with little or no interference from the government. When, as a result of the Parent Commission, which reformed education in Quebec, if you went to a cégep, it was because of a recommendation of the Parent Commission, there was a kind of compromise with the church. We have a Ministry of Education now, but you can still teach confessional religion. When we say confessional religion, we mean religion from a particular religious perspective. And you can control the curriculum of that. You can control the textbooks that are used. But on the other aspects of the curriculum, you have no say, basically. So there was a negotiation with the church. So over the years, there was this move to deconfessionalize the system. Eventually, the government says we're going to look into deconfessionalizing the system. They had to get the Constitution changed, an article of the Constitution that gave that right to confessional education from 1867. So there had to be a vote in Parliament in Ottawa. The minister who went there at the time to ask for that vote, the Minister of Education, was Pauline Marois.
Ce que je veux faire maintenant, c'est d'organiser des commissions scolaires sur une base linguistique et je veux pour ce faire que nous déconfessionnalisions les structures que sont les commissions scolaires.
En 1997, Pauline Marois est ministre de l'Éducation. Elle se rend au Parlement à Ottawa pour réclamer un amendement constitutionnel et elle l'obtient. Catholiques et protestants perdent ainsi leurs privilèges. 2 ans plus tard, dans un rapport commandé par Mme Marois, Jean-Pierre Proulx propose un modèle de laïcité ouverte et recommande l'implantation d'un programme de culture religieuse.
What the government did, they said, don't worry. We're only going to have English and French school boards. You can have Catholic schools and Protestant schools within an English school board or a French school board. A year later they said, don't worry, even though you don't have Catholic schools and Protestant schools, you can teach Catholic and Protestant religion as an option. Now, if you have a public school system that favors groups, Catholics and Protestants, over Jews, over Hindus, over Muslims, that is against the Charter of Human Rights. Provinces in Canada have what is called a notwithstanding clause. So notwithstanding that clause, you can override it. Quebec did it once for language, could do it again if they wanted to. Finally, the Liberal government decided, they set up a committee, the Proulx Commission, to study the possibility of going to a non-confessional system at all levels of the ministry. There was a huge pushback from Francophone Catholic Quebecers. And that's where it's still very delicate in Quebec. You know, ils ont sorti notre religion d'école à cause des autres. And people who were not, let me tell you, very present in church, but it was a cultural Catholicism also. It made strange bedfellows. Because there's a mouvement des Québécois qui se dit neutre, but is really anti-religious. So they don't want any religion in the schools. And then there's very conservative Christian parents, and maybe of other religions, who say, we don't want anybody else teaching our kids' religion, and we certainly don't want to hear about other religions. So that group lost their case in the Supreme Court.
La prépondérance à l'enseignement est à la chrétienté. Ça, c'est le reflet de notre culture, de ce que nous sommes, et le matériel didactique va refléter cela.
I think it probably is a case-by-case issue, although, once some schools and parents have worked out an accommodation, I think others could probably learn from that example and see what works and what doesn't. Like I said, the evidence in the case about the curriculum was fairly general, but assuming that, I think the accommodation would have to work in a situation where parents can identify the specific concerns they have about the curriculum so that they can then suggest an alternative that their children could participate in, either, some independent work or reading or demonstrate that they're getting the knowledge that is being taught in the classroom in other ways. As the law currently stands, there wouldn't be any obligation on schools to accommodate, at least not based on the general kind of evidence we have in the BERC course so far. The CCLA intervened in this case to try and ensure that the Supreme Court continued to take or took a liberal approach to considering when freedom of religion has been violated, and focused on the sincerity of belief requirement. And the Supreme Court's decision in this case maintains the sincerity of belief approach, but also incorporates an objective component to determinations of when a freedom of religion has been violated that I think does potentially muddy the waters in terms of freedom of religion cases going forward. I think, our concern as an organization that fights to promote and protect civil liberties, including freedom of religion, is that the court may be put in a position where people are going to be coming to them and saying our freedom of religion has been violated, and the court is going to say, no, it hasn't, you're wrong. You may feel that your freedom of religion has been infringed, but that's not the case objectively, and you're off to deal with them on your own. And the CCLA is concerned that the court didn't look for ways to accommodate, religious concerns or concerns about violations of freedom of religion, and instead simply turned these applicants away without getting into the real issues that they want to bring forward. The concern here is that they may be setting a lower threshold, a higher threshold for deciding when freedom of religion has been violated, and that puts a burden on individuals who are coming to the court for a remedy, and we're concerned about that.
I started complaining to the school board in 2004 when my son got to grade 5. 5 years later, when his youngest sister got there and they were still doing it, we went to a lawyer and had him send a letter to the school. So he said at the next board meeting, you need to abolish this program because it's clearly a violation. And you know, the lawyer we talked to kind of laughed when he saw it. And you know, he said, oh, this won't be a problem. They'll do it right away. They know they have to. You know, so we said that, fully expecting that to be the end of it. And we went to the school board meeting. It didn't come up. So we filed the papers. As soon as we did, they quickly had a policy meeting, and then the next school board meeting, they changed their policy, but you know, like immediately. But yeah, we originally we launched the claim basically January 11th or something of 2010. So it's a 3-year process to get to a hearing. Mm-hmm. What they changed it to was that religious materials would be distributed, and the intent, as they expressed it in the media, was to make the schools more inclusive of the religions. So we applied and said we'd like to distribute some humanist material or non-belief material. And the school board said, well, we're only going to distribute to people that are in the MIM. But if you're in the MIM, we're going to expand it. There's a Multifaith council in Ontario. It's a government-funded thing. As far as I can tell, it's a waste of money, but they seem like nice people. But they do a listing of some of the religions, and there's a criteria to get into that. So I asked them later if there had been any expansion. After, I think at the end of 2010, they said, well, there's only been one request, and it was the Gideons again. The Gideons aren't in this MIM document. So right off the bat, there's a problem. They didn't allow anyone else in. They did continue to let the Gideons in. Nothing changed. They reworded their policy and said, look, we're more inclusive, but they didn't actually take any action on it. Yeah. They didn't solicit anything from anyone. They didn't advertise that they were willing to do it. And you know, it was clearly nothing but a wording change of the policy. The original wording said we were going to allow the Gideons in. I mean, it was explicit, so I mean, it was absolutely biased. Certainly, education about religion is appropriate, as long as you're including all the concepts. But this is exclusive, oh no, only our group's in, type of thing. No, it's obviously inappropriate in our culture. And there's 4 boards that it's come up at, 3 or 4, since we challenged our school board, and all of them have decided the same thing, that it doesn't belong, and they've taken it out. And certainly in larger communities like Toronto or Montreal, you're not going to see Gideon Bibles being handed out, and there's just no way that would be tolerated in a multicultural environment. Parents who wish their children to be indoctrinated or you know, involved in Christian or any other religious activity, they have a pretty easy time with that. There's churches all over. There's also mosques and temples and all sorts of stuff. And you know, there are a few fringe groups that maybe have trouble keeping their kids in the community, but certainly the mainstream religions, there's no difficulty at all raising your kids in a religious environment. So why go to a public school? Well, because there's all these parents that have chosen not to do that. And how can we get at those kids? So, you know, if you're going to distribute something, the Gideons want to give out their Bible, they can go to the church groups. There's lots of them support the Gideons and endorse them and say, hey, listen, all the kids that come to your Sunday school will give them a Bible. That's great. There's no problem doing that. And your parents are okay with it. When you go to the public school system, it's not to get those kids. It's to get the kids of the parents that don't bring their kids to those groups and don't want their kids to get it or don't care. That's what they're going after. And you know, to me, that's just, I mean, I can't think of being more offensive than going after somebody else's kids. What we're really challenging is the school board's distribution of a permission slip, but giving exclusive access to doing that, or exclusivity to this one organization or this one theology in this case, access to that distribution. So, I mean, it seems kind of bizarre. Why would anybody challenge it? And obviously the reason we challenge that is because we just picked the most obvious thing that we could challenge. There's all sorts of stuff that we felt going on in the school systems that were inappropriate. My first two kids were both taught the Lord's Prayer in class without my knowledge. But what they do wrong is they give exclusive access to one organization and they exclude all the other ones. So they set up a perception that the school board and therefore the government, because it's a public school board, it's a government-run organization, endorses this one group over the others. So yes, you can be any religion you want, but this is the only one that we hold that we will distribute stuff for. This is how it's perceived. I argued the case myself. Apparently I did a decent job of it, but clearly, you know, if you're doing something you're not trained in, you're at a disadvantage. The argument about whether or not atheism is a creed or not is probably something that someone with more legal background than I am should argue. So there's a bit of a concern that a precedent could get set that's a negative precedent. And that's why there's a lot of interest in the trial. The Human Rights Commission sent their own lawyers, as well as the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. But their argument was that, and literally their lawyer made the point that if I, as an atheist, were to get fired for not being Catholic, that I did not have recourse in the Human Rights Tribunal because I'm an atheist, and I can't make a creed argument because I don't have a creed. It's a ridiculous double standard, and I'm sure that the adjudicator, it's not actually a trial, it's a hearing, so it's an adjudicator, not a judge. Sure, the adjudicator in this case will look at that and go, no, I don't think that's quite the intent of the Human Rights Code. The mentality of it was, if I'm saying that my creed was being discriminated against, I can't because I don't actually have one. The problem with their argument was my argument. My argument wasn't that they were discriminating against non-belief. My argument was that they were discriminating on behalf of Christianity, and that is equally outlawed or disallowed. You cannot come up and promote one religion or one creed over others. So in a situation where you're working for someone and the person's a strong born-again Christian or Muslim, or whatever else, and they say, you have to follow, you can't work on Sunday, you can't do this, and what have you. They're discriminating on behalf of their religion, regardless of what your religious views are. So that's our argument. We never argued that they were discriminating specifically against non-belief. A Muslim couldn't have gotten a book distributed either, and neither could a Hindu or a Sikh or anything like that. It was Christians only is the way it was. And if you read the code, it is very clear that that's not allowed. And if you read the charter, it would also reflect that as well. I'm quite sure. This was a provincial. Tribunals are a provincial body, so related more to the Human Rights Code than the federal charter of rights. Saying, no, we're not against anybody else's religion, but we're promoting this one, and that in of itself is discriminatory. I think that's an important point, and it's one that most people kind of miss. And frankly, I did too. When it was first suggested it was a Human Rights Code issue, I thought, really? Well, how is that human rights? Because they're not attacking me, they're doing something that I don't want them to do. I think it should be illegal for them to do that, but why is that a human rights thing? And it is, because for everyone who's not a Christian, or even a lot of Christians that are a little bit concerned with the separation of church and state, they're using a religious test and a religious motive in some of their procedures, and that is human rights because other people are of different religions, unless you're someplace where everybody's, for the Catholics to distribute a Catholic Bible. You don't want that, don't put your kids in a Catholic school, it's consistent, but when you're in a public environment, no, you can't do that. Even if no one objects, it's wrong.
Before, the state was favoring Catholics and Protestants. It's not anymore. There is a separation. Now, is it ever really separated religion from the state? What does that mean? Do we exclude from the public square groups that we don't like? Then it's no longer a public square.